Their parents, Andrew and Beverly, were no stranger to social services. There had been concerns that although they loved their children, they didn't know how to look after them very well. But after 4 years of parenting classes, they were told they no longer needed help. They weren't alone with their difficulties. At the time, Rochdale had one of the highest levels of children in care in the country. Here on the Langley estate where the families lived was an especially impoverished part of Rochdale. Half the residents were unemployed. A third of the houses were boarded up. It wasn't an easy place to bring up a family. But what happened here was beyond anyone's worst imagining. The first time Andrew and Beverly understood the full horror of the accusations against them was when they went to see their solicitor. He told them the social workers and the police believed they were part of a satanic abuse cult, said to include sexually abusing their children, the slaughter of animals, drinking of blood, and the sacrifice of human fetuses.
He said, yeah, your fetuses we all have got. It's frightened the life out now, but I might say something to murder.
He was going into detail, fetus, taking the kids out in the middle of the night, taking them to the graveyard. I was a bit gobsmacked because I knew we didn't do these sort of things, but yet he was reading them out, and this is what the children were supposed to be saying to him. And I just couldn't get it in the head that, in my head I was saying, no, the children wouldn't be saying that at all, because I knew the kid, it hadn't happened to the kid.
The social workers also suspected that they'd involved other children from the estate in their satanic ring. Families who knew Andrew and Beverly were targeted 3 months later at 7:30 in the morning on the 14th of June, 1990.
And we were just dragged and bundled out into a car, and we saw my mum being put into a police car.
I was scared when they got me in the car, and Cheryl was asking where are you taking us, where we're going, what's going on with my mum, what's she done.
11-year-old Lisa and her 2 sisters, 6-year-old Catherine and 15-year-old Cheryl, had no idea why they'd been forced from their home.
It was like we were being kidnapped. It was like something that you see on the telly, as if we were, just being... They might as well have put blankets over our heads and just bundled us in, They just shoved us all in and set off.
13-year-old David and his 6-year-old sister Caroline were also taken from their home, and their 18-year-old brother was arrested for sexual abuse.
It was all crazy. I didn't understand any of it, and to be honest with you, it prostituted me up as well.
12 children were taken that morning. They were all interviewed by social workers.
She wanted to talk to us separately, and he took me in this big room, and then she just shut the door and started asking me loads of questions.
Then we got a doll, naked doll, and they started pointing to, the genitalia of it, and they said, can you tell me in your own words what that is? I was like, yeah, a bit. Then they turned it over, and what's that? 1.5. And, you know what I mean, they'd say, well, do you know what it is? I'm a girl, and that. Well, yeah.
And little girl's part. Do you know what they call little girl's part? Vagina, yes. And boy's part we call the TV. Yeah. And what else do we call the boy's part? I'm not sure about that. Yeah.
15-year-old Cheryl was asked to describe the details of sexual intercourse.
What I'm trying to get at is what happens to his body when that happens. He can't feel good. Yeah. But could you tell? Could you tell if he had an orgasm apart from the nerve?
Start holding tight and like kissing the ball. Or going faster.
Is that what happens to his penis? So do you know how you could get babies from making them?
After the intimate ones, they asked things like, have you ever been pregnant? And I was so shocked. I just said no, not at all, and I really didn't understand why they'd asked that. But afterwards, and when we got home and had read in the papers and the paperwork that my dad had, it was things like they thought that babies were being born just for sacrifice.
Cheryl and the other children were frightened and bewildered by such talk. But where did such bizarre-sounding suggestions come from? If you look at the papers at the time, it gives you some idea. There was a steady stream of stories based on rumours of secret satanic abuse taking place across Britain. They involved lurid accounts of children being sexually abused, animals, even babies, being sacrificed. Anyone working in child protection, including social workers, was left in no doubt that a new and terrible form of abuse was being perpetrated on innocent children. Conferences for social workers debated the threat posed by Satanism, and special training videos like this one arrived from America.
They would dress up perhaps as Mickey Mouse or Santa Claus and abuse the child.
You get a lot of shark material from ritually abused children.
Taking parts of little babies and eating them.
Having adults participate in human and animal sacrifice.
You know, these ritually abused 4-year-olds want to play checkers.
British conferences were organised to discuss this new form of abuse. Articles appeared in social work journals, and the NSPCC advised their staff of the signs to look out for. They were called satanic indicators.
Nottinghamshire's Director of Social Services has released his long-awaited report on allegations.
Then in 1989, it appeared as if the first British case of ritual satanic abuse had been uncovered.
4 other sites in Nottingham that children are alleged to have suffered ritual abuse.
One child talked about when we're at school we pray to God, but when we're at home we pray to Satan.
It was later proved to have no link to devil worshipping, but by that time, the genie was out of the bottle. Every social worker was on the lookout for cases in their own backyard, and they started to spring up everywhere.
Ritualized abuse of children by devils.
A man who claimed he was possessed during an investigation in satanic ritual abuse.
People in Black Road, a baby was murdered, and then I was raped.
Being involved in ritual abuse as part of devil work.
Signed a parchment, actually selling my soul to Satan.
The existence of devil worshipping societies in Britain.
Professor Elizabeth Newson, who was an independent witness in the Rochdale case, believed the social workers there had become swept up in a satanic panic.
They were right in the middle of the first flash, if you like, of conferences that originated in America. There was an unhealthy excitement about the latest thing in social work, and to find themselves suddenly faced with this in Rochdale was a very exciting thing for them.
The only physical evidence of satanic rituals discovered by the police and social services amounted to a cross made out of lollipop sticks and a ceremonial bowl used for holy water found in Andrew and Beverly's house. But it was the interviews with the children that social workers believed to be certain proof of abuse.
Didn't you have any secret about it at school? No.
So I'm wondering really, if there's anything you want to tell us that's upsetting you? No? No, things are gone.
Stephen does not like them. They do horrid things.
Oh! I wondered. No! Is that what you said, Mom?
Even though the children denied they'd been abused, social workers interpreted their comments as clear evidence that they'd been dragged into satanic rituals. There was a handy checklist at the time that the social workers could use to guide them. The satanic indicators were a widely circulated checklist of behaviours designed to indicate whether or not a child might be a victim of satanic abuse. And looking back on them now, certainly some of them seem legitimate cause for concern. A child being preoccupied with death, or thinking they've got something foreign inside them like a bomb. But others seem more questionable, like a child being preoccupied with urine and feces, being afraid of ghosts and monsters, not wanting to be left with babysitters. Surely many children behave like that. There were clear guidelines about interviewing suspected child victims of sexual abuse, but they were often ignored by the key social worker Susan Hammersley and the rest of the team, led by Jill France.
How did you get into your house, Dan? You go through the house.
Daniel's fantasies and dreams about ghosts were taken at face value as evidence that a ring of devil worshippers were abusing children, and the social workers believed that ghosts was Daniel's name for his abusers.
So, do you fly out of the window with the ghost? Or you do? So do you do your spinning before you go out of the window then?
Some later interviews were videoed, but the crucial first interview, contrary to the guidelines, was not recorded, and no contemporaneous notes were taken. But the social worker Susan Hammersley claimed that Daniel had told her elaborate tales of ghosts who wore hoods, took him flying, gave him sweets and drinks, and that they'd even locked him in a cage. Another clip from this later interview with Daniel shows clearly how his words were misinterpreted.
Does the cross look like this? Or does it look like that? Or does it look like this? Which one is it? That. So is it in the middle that the line goes across? So it looks like that? Yeah. So where does the ghost set fire to it? Does he pick it up and set fire to it? Or if picks it up and sets when it's on fire.
On the face of it, this seems like an innocent conversation about a young boy's fantasies. But the social workers later presented it in a more sinister light to the judge, saying it showed Daniel talking about how ghosts, or his abusers, set fire to inverted crosses. Another independent expert witness believed there was a much more ordinary explanation for 6-year-old Daniel's interest in ghosts.
I gather that they've been reading about ghosts at school, and there'd been a haunting in the family that all the children in the neighbourhood knew about, such that they had to invite the priest to come and bless the house. And in addition, he'd been allowed to watch some regrettable, violent videos at home, and I think these things had added together in his mind and fed the disturbance that I was seeing.
But by now the social workers were encouraged in their belief that satanic abuse was taking place, and Daniel's sister, 11-year-old Julie, was interviewed. She was asked about her dreams. Again, despite the guidelines, the interview wasn't taped. But in later recorded interviews, she made it clear that nothing bad had happened to her.
If you did have any bad secrets, any things that somebody was really frightened of you, would you be able to tell anybody? Yeah. Who would you tell? You tell me? You haven't got any?
They sat us in this room and they asked us whether anything bad was happening at home. And I said no.
But this was ignored, and Julie's denials weren't mentioned in later official statements to the court. Instead, the social worker pressed on, this time asking Julie about her dreams.
I'd quite like you to draw me something out of one of your dreams.
I did say I dreamt of ghosts. I drew pictures of ghosts, had nightmares, but they twisted it, tried to make out that it was happening in our lives at home.
You need to know about your dreams so that you can try and make sure that they don't happen again.
How were the social workers interpreting Julie's dreams? Were they interpreting them as reality?
Yes. Immediately. Now, I thought, hang on a minute, that's a big step from she had had these things happen to her to she had to convey it by way of dreams. What does that mean?
Julie made it clear that what she described was only in a dream that she then woke up from.
So was your mum in the dream? No, I woke up, that was the end of it. Oh, right. That was a horrible dream, wasn't it?
On another occasion, Julie makes clear again she's talking about a dream, not about reality.
Did he come to your bedroom in nasty clothes? No.
Despite repeated questioning, neither Julie nor Daniel accused anyone of abusing them. But convinced that there was a wider ring of abuse, the social workers started to try and find out who else was involved. So with some prompting, Julie talked about her friends and the people she knew on the estate.
I played out something in the game.
Who's a friend? What about Lisa? Because you said Lisa was in this, didn't you?
Yeah.
Was Lisa ever in this one?
At the time we didn't understand what they were trying to get at. We didn't know why they was making us do these things, watching us from a camera, sticking us in a room with loads of toys, making us play with them. And thinking back, we should have used the things that you said then. You wish you had said something else, or you said a different thing. We didn't realise playing with toys and doing all that was going to stop us from going home, did we?
Julie's innocent mention of her friends was the evidence the social workers thought they needed that other children were involved in a widespread cult of satanic abuse. So 3 weeks after being mentioned by Julie, Lisa and 11 other children were taken in the early morning raids and interviewed. After being questioned, Lisa was separated from her 2 sisters. Her friendship with Julie singled her out as a likely victim of satanic abuse.
They put me in a room and locked me in, and they was kicking and punching the door, and they wouldn't let me out. The door was just locked. And I just said, well, I'm not leaving here without her. Well, they're saying, well, I'm sorry, that isn't your decision. We've made a decision that we're not happy with Lisa, the way she's reacting. She won't be coming home.
Get home. Lisa's coming home. Lisa's coming home. Lisa's coming home. Get out.
I just remember giving up, obviously, because I'd wasted all my energy trying to get out, and just sliding down the wall and sat on the floor crying.
Lisa and 9 other children were taken into care, and from that moment allowed no contact of any kind with their parents.
I written letters to my mum, and they said they'd passed them on, but my mum's now told me that she never got any, and she'd written to me as well, and I never got any of her letters. There was not allowed any contact at all. They thought that we'd write in code.
The social workers also believed if the parents saw their children, they could make secret satanic signals.
And we did ask them as well, what sort of signals are we supposed to be doing then? And she said, well, how did she put it? If you scratch your head, that means shut up and don't say a word. If you pick your nose, the kids get a bit excited and go mad. Anything we did or scratch our arms, that meant a signal to them. So that's why they decided access was terminated.
I used to ask the social worker every day when she come, when can I go home? And she just used to say, in a couple of days, in a couple of days. And the days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, and they were still saying the same thing. So I knew they was lying to me.
Meanwhile, things weren't easy back home. The wild accusations spread around the estate. Many believed the devil had come to Langley.
Thought we had like things buried in the back garden. That was the rumours that were going round. Just because of these social workers that believed in all this rubbish.
The local council became increasingly concerned about the horrifying abuses social services said were being perpetrated on so many children in their borough. At Rochdale Town Hall, councillors and the police gathered to discuss the new threat.
I asked the deputy director of what he'd heard and what evidence did he have, and he said that fingers of children had been cut off, children nailed to the cross in the cemetery, children microwaved, newborn babies microwaved, and of course I looked at the policeman and said, have you been round to the hospitals and the cemeteries, and have you seen any four-fingered children knocking about? And of course he said no. I said, well, what evidence have we got to say any of this has gone on? He said none.
Nevertheless, 3 months after the Dawn raids, another family was targeted after showing some neighbourly support.
We used to go round to Bevan Andrews, and they used to come round to ours, having a brew, having a laugh, playing cards and having a couple of drinks with them.
I was getting proper worried, you know, and I didn't like the idea of their children getting took, which in the end it did happen.
It happened on a September morning. Linda and John's eldest daughter Caroline was taken with her younger brother and sister.
I think it was Stephen or Michelle that had to go and be interviewed first, and I was the last one. And I was sat on the floor, and my mum turned around and said to me, she said, I don't think you're coming back home with me.
And Caroline turned around and said, yeah, I am. I said, no, you're not.
And she turned and said to me, so when you go in that room, make sure that you tell the truth.
And it made a ward of court at 25 past 4. At 25 past 4 they got made of courtship. It was taken away. The social services took me back home, crying all the way home, and they said the best thing for you to do is go and see the solicitor.
Unknown to their parents, Caroline, Michelle and Stephen were medically examined for signs of abuse.
I had to lie on the bed, and I mean, 12, having to lie on the bed and having a doctor looking down there is not nice at all. And I think our Stephen was really, really frightened, and I had to sit in with him. He had the curtain around, and I stayed in the room whilst they checked Stephen over. Wasn't nice at all.
It was an experience shared by all the children who were taken.
Thinking about it now, yeah, it makes me feel violated.
I felt sick. I felt invaded.
I do think one of my parents should have been there with me, because they had no right to just do that to a child, because in my eyes that's abuse.
Strong evidence is required to undertake physical examinations of this kind. The evidence used to justify them was from one of 6-year-old Daniel's early interviews, in which a doll was dressed up to look like one of the ghosts in Daniel's stories.
And then that goes over there like that. Is that right? And is this the thing that makes him fly? Right. So there he is in the loft.
Daniel had said that he played a game of Tig with the ghost, but the social worker suspected that this could be code for something more sinister.
And he has to tig you back, so... Here we are then. Can you show me how does he tig you back? He's putting you... Where does he put his hand? On your tummy? Yes. And do you have your clothes on then? Yes. Yeah.
Daniel clearly says that the ghost tigs him or touches him on his tummy.
On your tummy? Yes.
But this was ignored and somehow interpreted as touching him on his genitals. From that, it was concluded that all of the children must be being sexually abused.
The decision by Greater Manchester Police has thrown into more confusion the action taken by Rochdale Social Services.
The police dropped the case after a 6-month investigation.
Failed to find evidence of satanic rituals and child abuse.
But social services were determined to pursue the case through the family court. Their allegations became increasingly bizarre.
I don't know how it all actually come about, but we were getting accused of the bar was being used as an altar and drinking the blood of animals or something, weren't we?
Yeah.
There's also something about fetuses as well, wasn't there? Someone mentioned about that.
Yeah, that we were supposed to be going to graveyards for that.
Oh, I was supposed to be going to graveyards or something. Where they got all that rubbish from, I haven't a clue. Because there was nothing like that at all.
While her parents tried to fight the accusations, Caroline adjusted to being in care with foster parents, separated 50 miles away from her brother Stephen and sister Michelle.
Every night I used to kneel down at the bottom of my bed and sit and say, please God, let me go home. Look after Michelle and Stephen and my mum and dad.
The families weren't able to appeal to anyone for help, other than their solicitor, as the court had imposed strict conditions of secrecy. They weren't allowed to tell their local MP or local councillor. How able were the parents on the Langley estate to deal with social services and to fight their own corner?
Well, they weren't equipped. If you're fighting a bureaucracy of courts and police and social services, they're just normal people, which are not very educated, many of them. Some of them couldn't even understand the letters they were being sent to them. They didn't understand what was happening to them, to the children.
But as the court case approached, some local councillors and journalists began to challenge the secrecy surrounding the case and the claims of the social workers.
Media interest in the case was growing, and the activities of the Rochdale social workers were being publicly questioned. The idea that 20 children could be sexually abused in secret devil-worshipping ceremonies seemed increasingly far-fetched.
After up to 6 months in care, the social workers began to allow the children to visit their parents at weekends. But it was always hard when the time came for the children to go back to the care home.
On a Saturday when me and Sean Stephen was at my mum's and the car came for us and we didn't want to leave, there was a song on the playing on tape of the Writers Brothers, and I think it was in Chain Melody, and the words in that, I was sat in the front seat and Michelle Stephen was in the back, and I looked round and Michelle Stephen was in the back of the car crying, and I was sat in the front, and the words to that song, wait for me, I'll be coming home.
Don't stay with them.
11 months after the first children had been taken into care, social workers brought the case to the family court. Only now would the parents find out if their children could come home. As the court case progressed, the mistakes made by the social workers were laid bare.
I think the key error right from the very start was that the social workers were absolutely sure that they knew best. That here at last was satanic abuse. You know, they were witnessing it, and therefore whatever they interpreted was bound to be true.
I suppose when I saw these drawings today, I got a bit worried because I've seen drawings a bit like this before.
I don't know why, but I drawn to Mr. Man. I mean, at 13, don't do that, but I did. And they said, why are they not wearing any clothes? I mean, do you know what I mean? Mr. Square don't wear pants.
He's not got his private bits on, though, has he? The other line.
I just found it all really, really strange and really scary. I mean, I suppose you could say in a sense that was abuse in itself.
The questioning of the children was often repetitive, and according to some experts, bordering on interrogation. This is Lisa's interview on the day she was taken.
She must describe what it was like. What do you think ghosts are like? Did you saw ghosts? What do you think ghosts are like? Who's that? What? Can you tell me a little bit more about the ghost that you were frightened of? What? Oh, you were talking about the ghost that was at Julie's house. That was the ghost that frightened you. Wasn't it? Is that right? I didn't see that ghost. You didn't see that ghost. So you were frightened of the ghost. Julie told you it was in her house. So when you were scared of the ghost that had been at Julie's house, were you scared of any other ghosts then?
The problem is that it's very difficult for a child to withstand an adult who repeats and repeats and repeats the same thing, is really insistent about what they're trying to put over. Children are used to accepting what teachers say, what social workers say, and so on. It's very difficult for them to deny things.
As well as singling out the key social worker Susan Hammersley and the team leader Jill France, the judge criticised the whole of Rochdale's Social Services Department, saying that the interviews were below standard and the social workers lacked adequate training. Here we see the social worker repeatedly asking advice over a phone link to her colleagues.
Got in here is a telephone link to a room behind there. Hiya, is you back yet? Alright. I'm just wondering whether to start explaining the setup really. Just want to check something on the phone. Hiya, I'm just wondering how much more I can say about that really. Just a minute and ring through. Hiya, any thoughts on that? Anything I need to go back over, or I'm thinking about moving on really. Want to touches, etc. Right, okay, thanks.
You watched hours of interviews with the children. What was your assessment of the interviews?
Yeah, they made painful viewing. Really, the children's denials weren't listened to. And sometimes the children would be really distressed, and yet nobody was there to comfort them in their distress. Instead, the interviews were just allowed to drag on and on, far too long.
One such interview was with David's 6-year-old sister Caroline, who cried from the moment she entered the room, and within 2 minutes was sobbing uncontrollably. Caroline asked again and again for her brother David, and cried non-stop for 17 minutes.
Caroline couldn't think of anything but the fact that she wanted her brother, and she wanted to go home, and she said those two things over and over and over again, and cried for 17 minutes. And the social worker, she really went on and on and on, trying to explain to Caroline through Caroline's crying. Now, you just can't do that with a child.
We've got to try and find out whether it's safe enough for you to go home, Caroline. And that's what you want to know, isn't it, Caroline?
Then she says, "Are you listening, Caroline? Can you hear me, Caroline?" Well, it's obvious that Caroline can barely hear her through her own tears.
If you stop crying, then we can talk about you going back.
The judge described this interview as one of the most abiding and disturbing parts of the case.
Well, when you stop crying, you go back.
Caroline was 6. She didn't even know what a social worker was. I can be surprised that she was distressed. Fucking assholes.
Any children taken from their bed at dead of night and...
As the case wore on, the satanic abuse claims were disproved one by one, and the actions of the social workers were increasingly criticised.
The social workers believed that they were saving these children, and they simply were not. Now, sometimes you can see the obsessionalism about it by the fact that the social workers were quite prepared to tell very ordinary lies.
Do you know, I think this ghost is really very naughty. He does a lot of things to you that aren't very nice, doesn't he? Won't you put me in a cage? Can you get out of the cage if you want to?
Yeah.
Who lets you out?
Myself.
Oh, you can let yourself out?
Yeah.
And are the ghosts all right, or do they shout at you as you come out?
Okay.
They're okay.
When did you first time?
Oh, they're very kind ghosts? Oh, right.
But in court, this conversation was presented as Daniel telling how he'd been forced by his abusers, the ghosts, into a cage and then locked in. That supported the social worker's theory of satanic abuse, but it was not what Daniel had said.
You call them lies. They told them the wrong things about what was going on with the children, out of malice or out of a misguided zeal to help these children.
Well, you know, the judge was kind enough to say it was misguided zeal. I'm more straight talking perhaps about that, and I thought it was a lie.
As the case drew to a close, it was clear that there was no evidence of organised satanic abuse on the Langley estate.
I interviewed all the children, all the parents. I watched 100+ hours of video, and I read all the reports, and I found no evidence at all to support the fear that they'd been satanically abused. I simply don't believe it. I don't think there was any.
It seems highly improbable that these parents have either the inclination or the intellectual curiosity to become involved in ritual abuse or witchcraft.
The judge made clear in his summing up that serious mistakes have been made and they should never be repeated.
At the end of all the evidence, the conclusion is inevitable that neither these children nor their parents have been involved in any way with satanic ritual or organized abuse.
The children were allowed to return home. All except for one family. Andrew and Beverly's children were kept in care. Social services now claimed that their poor parenting skills and debts meant they couldn't look after them.
It was hard to take it in. Couldn't believe it. Like, this is not happening to us. Because we miss them a lot, didn't we? That we'd been torn apart, the family had been ripped apart.
Andrew and Beverly were permitted to see their children for 1 hour a month, and eventually visits to Daniel were limited to 1 hour a year. Social services claimed it was too emotionally distressing for Daniel to see his parents more often.
I felt a stranger in a way, but I knew him. I didn't like it. I was asking for more access with him, but they wouldn't have it.
I didn't think the kids would ever come home. And the reason I think that is because we didn't really have any support. It was just myself and Bevel. And we were on our own.
Andrew, Beverly and their children were the forgotten family. They were ill-equipped to challenge social services, and after 4 years of fighting had got nowhere. Local councillor Tony Heaford heard about their plight.
And what was your reaction when you realised that they'd been in care for so long?
Well, I couldn't say a lot because I thought there must be something more on these families than what I knew about the others. So I had to ask the social services for the file on them. And of course I read the file. And I didn't find one word of abuse in it. I found a lot of words about having no money and debt and things like that. But never found anything about abuse.
With Tony Heaford's help, one by one the children were allowed to come home. Finally, after 10 years in care, Daniel, the first child to be taken, was the last allowed back.
It was near Christmas and got a phone call from mum. Surprise, anything. Asked me if I want to come over for Christmas. I said yeah. Couldn't stop smiling. Went in. I had Christmas and that. It's nice. Just said to mum, could I stay here? I said yeah.
It was nice that first Christmas, wasn't it?
Yeah.
All the family back together. It felt normal, didn't it? Didn't feel unsafe. didn't feel dangerous.
Daniel and his family are still together here on the estate, like all the other families, trying to piece their lives back together again. But they were not the only ones to fall victim to the satanic panic.
The 9 children taken from their homes in Orkney after allegations of ritual child sex abuse were tonight reunited with their...
They were taken from homes in the Knowsley area after 2 teenage girls made allegations about ritual...
The girl, her brother, 2 sisters and 4 other children, all from Ayrshire...
The children are alleged to have suffered ritual abuse. In the late 1980s and early 90s, more than 80 cases of alleged satanic abuse were reported across Britain. Not one was ever proven to have any connection with satanic cults. Following the case, Rochdale Council accepted the judge's view that dawn raids to remove children were harmful. Rochdale's Director of Social Services resigned, and extra training and more rigorous guidelines were introduced. The social workers chose not to take part in this programme, but the trial judge said that they were dedicated and warm-hearted, with considerable skills devoted to the children's welfare. He didn't question their good faith or good intentions. The council says the pressures facing social workers can be immense, requiring difficult decisions involving vulnerable children. The council adds that it's already apologised for the mistakes made and took immediate steps to ensure they wouldn't be repeated. It recognises the painful and traumatic experience of the families. But for the children, that does not add up to an apology for the trauma they've suffered. They're taking the council to court.
You think that we'll get a kind of public apology in the similar way as the way we were smeared across the papers?
Well, I think we have a very good case for a public apology. It was really one of the biggest mistakes made by social services in the last 25 years. So they should apologise, and we've asked them for an apology, and we're just waiting to see what they say on that.
As they continue to wait for the council's response, the memories live on.
From coming out, I couldn't, just life was so messed up after what these had done. I couldn't fit back into the way my old life was, if you know what I mean.
I'm not going to let me depression and anxiety get me down. I've learnt to control it, and I do get angry because of the things that I've been through and having to learn to control it, because I blame them for what they did, for me being the person I am today.
I don't know how to start a conversation up or talk to people. I just don't have that confidence. Everyone else seems to have.
I mean, I can't say if things had been different if we hadn't been taken into care, because, you know, we didn't have that opportunity. It just happened, and I say it's like a piece of paper that's had a chunk ripped out of it, and then you stuck the other bit to it, and that bit's just, you can never bring that bit back. What they've done, it's made me angry. And all kids have imaginations. They make stories up. That's what kids do.